Embracing vulnerability is often seen as a risk, as something to avoid in a world that prizes strength, resilience, and control. Yet the paradox is that vulnerability is not a weakness, it is the very essence of courage, the gateway through which all meaningful transformation occurs. When you open yourself to vulnerability, you are not exposing a flaw or admitting defeat. Instead, you are creating a space where growth, change, and deeper understanding can take root. To embrace vulnerability is to step into the unknown, to walk into territory where the outcome is uncertain and the fear of judgment or rejection looms large. It means allowing yourself to be seen as you are without the armor of perfection or the facade of invincibility. And while that may feel terrifying, it is also profoundly liberating. It's in those moments of openness when we drop our defenses that we begin to connect with our authentic selves. Think about it, how often do we hide behind walls built from years of learned behavior, societal expectations, or past experiences that have left us scarred? We project versions of ourselves that we believe others want to see polished, successful, unbothered by the trials of life. But behind those walls, the real work of transformation is stifled. Vulnerability allows us to dismantle these walls and confront the parts of ourselves that we've kept hidden for so long. It's in this rawness that we find the seeds of growth. Being vulnerable requires us to be honest with ourselves first and foremost. It means looking in the mirror and acknowledging where we've fallen short, where we've been afraid, and where we've resisted change. But it also involves recognizing our worth, our potential, and our capacity for growth. When we embrace this truth, the whole truth of who we are, we can begin the process of real, lasting transformation. Vulnerability also fosters connection, not just with ourselves, but with others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we invite others to see us in our entirety, imperfections and all. This level of honesty creates space for genuine relationships built on trust and mutual understanding. We begin to realize that we're not alone in our struggles, that others too face fears, insecurities, and uncertainties. In this shared human experience, we find strength and solidarity, knowing that we don't have to carry the weight of transformation on our own. Moreover, vulnerability pushes us beyond the confines of comfort. It forces us to sit with discomfort, to face the things we've been avoiding, and to confront the parts of ourselves that may be holding us back. It is easy to stay in the comfort zone, to remain in control of every aspect of our lives. But transformation doesn't happen there. Real growth occurs when we step into the discomfort of the unknown, when we allow ourselves to feel deeply, to experience setbacks, and to take risks that may expose our vulnerabilities, but also lead to profound change. In many ways, vulnerability is the foundation of all transformation because it strips away the superficial layers and brings us face to face with the core of who we are. It allows us to rebuild from a place of truth, authenticity, and purpose. Through vulnerability, we learn to trust ourselves more deeply, to lean into our instincts, and to rely on our inner strength rather than external validation. In today's fast-paced world, the idea of disconnecting can feel almost counterintuitive. We're surrounded by constant noise notifications buzzing, emails piling up, social media feeds demanding our attention, and an endless stream of tasks and responsibilities pulling us in every direction. In a society that often equates busyness with productivity and connection with validation, the thought of stepping away, of disconnecting, can feel unsettling. But the truth is, to truly reconnect with ourselves and with what matters most, we must first create the space to step back and disengage from the chaos. Disconnecting is not about withdrawing from life or isolating ourselves, rather. It's about making a deliberate choice to silence the external noise so that we can hear the internal voice that often gets drowned out. When we are constantly plugged into the demands of others, the pressures of work, and the endless comparison culture that surrounds us, we lose touch with our own thoughts, feelings, and desires. We become reactive instead of intentional, driven by the momentum of everything around us rather than by a clear sense of purpose and direction. There is a certain wisdom in pulling back from the frenzy of daily life to reflect, to breathe, and to recalibrate. In doing so, we give ourselves permission to reconnect with the things that are truly meaningful. Without the distraction of external noise, we can begin to ask ourselves the deeper questions: what do I really want? What brings me joy? What am I doing because it's expected of me? And what am I doing because it aligns with my values and my purpose? These questions are difficult to confront in the midst of constant distraction, but when we disconnect, we create the mental and emotional space necessary for honest reflection. Moreover, disconnecting allows us to regain a sense of clarity. When we are bombarded by endless inputs, whether it's information overload or the expectations of others, it becomes increasingly difficult to think clearly. We lose the ability to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between what serves our long-term growth and what merely satisfies an immediate need. By stepping away from the distractions, even for a short while, we give ourselves the gift of perspective. We can begin to see the bigger picture and make choices that are aligned with our true intentions, rather than simply reacting to the latest demand on our attention. This act of disconnecting also serves as a reminder that our worth is not tied to how much we produce or how constantly available we are to others. In a world that often glorifies the hustle, it can be easy to believe that slowing down is a sign of weakness or failure. But in reality, taking the time to disconnect is an act of self-care and self-preservation. It is a way of honoring our need for rest, reflection, and renewal. By giving ourselves permission to unplug, we acknowledge that our value is inherent, not something that must be earned through endless action and productivity. Additionally, disconnecting from the external world allows us to reconnect with our inner world, our emotions, our thoughts, and our bodies. Often we are so caught up in doing that we forget to simply be. We neglect the subtle cues our bodies give us, whether it's exhaustion, tension, or the need for stillness. We ignore the emotional signals that tell us when something is out of alignment, when we are stretching ourselves too thin or ignoring our deeper needs. But when we disconnect from the distractions, we can begin to tune back into those signals. We can start to notice what we have been ignoring and address it with care and attention. The process of disconnecting also allows us to deepen our relationships, not just with ourselves, but with others. In a world where connection is often reduced to superficial interactions, likes, comments, quick messages, true, meaningful connection can be lost. By stepping away from the constant digital noise, we can refocus our attention on the people who matter most in our lives. We can have real, unhurried conversations. We can be present with our loved ones in a way that fosters intimacy and understanding rather than distraction. When we disconnect from the shallow connections, we make room for deeper, more fulfilling relationships to flourish. Finally, disconnecting helps us tap into creativity and inspiration. Our minds need space to wander, to dream, and to explore ideas that aren't confined by the limits of our daily tasks. When we are constantly bombarded with input, there is little room for creative thought or innovation. But in the quiet moments of disconnection, our minds have the freedom to play, to experiment, and to generate new insights. Creativity thrives in the gaps, in the spaces where we are not preoccupied with external demands. By disconnecting, we allow ourselves to access that creative wellspring and reconnect with the part of ourselves that imagines, dreams, and creates. Quiet growth is one of the most powerful forces in our lives, yet it often goes unnoticed because it doesn't announce itself with fanfare or demand immediate recognition. It unfolds in the stillness, in the moments when we are working behind the scenes, away from the spotlight, where no one is watching or applauding. There is a certain beauty in this kind of growth, a kind of quiet strength that builds slowly but steadily, shaping us in ways that we might not even recognize until we look back and see how far we've come. We live in a world that glorifies instant results and dramatic transformations. The pressure to show visible progress to display success and achievement at every stage can make it seem as though quiet, gradual growth doesn't count for much. But in truth, the most lasting and profound transformations often happen in the silence, when no one is paying attention. It's in these moments that the real work is done, the foundational work that lays the groundwork for everything that will come later. Quiet growth is not about striving for external validation. It is about doing the inner work that requires patience, resilience, and consistency, even when it feels like nothing is happening. It is about committing to the process, trusting that every small step, every incremental change is contributing to something greater. This kind of growth may not be glamorous, and it may not always be visible to the outside world, but it is no less significant. In fact, it is often more meaningful because it is rooted in authenticity, driven by an internal desire to become better, rather than a need to impress or meet the expectations of others. One of the most challenging aspects of quiet growth is the lack of immediate feedback. When we are working towards something, whether it's personal development, a new skill, or a long-term goal, it can be frustrating not to see results right away. We may begin to doubt ourselves, to question whether our efforts are making a difference. But quiet growth requires faith. The kind of faith that allows us to keep going even when the rewards are not yet visible. It is the belief that the seeds we are planting today will, in time, bear fruit, even if we cannot yet see the full picture. This kind of growth also requires a deep sense of patience. We live in a world of quick fixes and shortcuts where everything is designed for maximum efficiency and speed. But quiet growth doesn't follow that timeline. It cannot be rushed or forced. It requires us to slow down, to be present in the moment, and to trust that change is happening even when it feels imperceptible. Just as a tree grows quietly beneath the surface, sending its roots deep into the earth before it ever breaks through the soil, so too does our personal growth often happen beneath the surface, unseen but essential. In the process of quiet growth, there is an opportunity to develop a kind of inner strength that can only come from perseverance. When we are not focused on immediate recognition or external rewards, we learn to rely on our own sense of purpose and determination. We become more resilient, more grounded in our convictions, and more willing to embrace the long journey of growth rather than seeking shortcuts or quick wins. It is through this process that we cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness and self-trust, learning to listen to our own instincts and inner guidance rather than being swayed by external opinions or pressures. Quiet growth also teaches us the value of humility. When we are not seeking to showcase our progress to the world, we become more focused on the growth itself, on the lessons we are learning along the way. There is a kind of humility that comes from recognizing that growth is not about proving ourselves to others, but about becoming more aligned with who we truly are. It's about letting go of the need for constant validation and embracing the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing we are evolving, even if no one else notices. In many ways, quiet growth is about laying a strong foundation. Just as a building cannot stand without a solid foundation, our personal and professional growth cannot be sustained without the inner work that often goes unnoticed. It's the habits we build, the small, consistent actions we take every day that ultimately lead to lasting change. Quiet growth is not about grand gestures or dramatic shifts. It's about the steady, deliberate progress that accumulates over time, transforming us from the inside out. There is also a kind of freedom that comes with quiet growth. When we are not constantly seeking approval or recognition, we are free to grow at our own pace, in our own way. We are not bound by the expectations of others or the need to perform for an audience. Instead, we can focus on what truly matters to us, on the areas of our lives where we want to see real, meaningful change. This kind of growth is deeply personal, and it allows us to take ownership of our journey rather than being driven by external pressures or timelines. Moreover, quiet growth often leads to the most profound and lasting transformations. When we allow ourselves the time and space to grow without the pressure of immediate results, we create the conditions for deep, sustained change. This is the kind of growth that endures, that withstands the challenges and setbacks that inevitably come our way. It is not flashy or attention-grabbing, but it is powerful in its persistence and its ability to create real, lasting impact. Quiet growth is also deeply connected to the idea of self-compassion. When we are focused on external validation, it's easy to become critical of ourselves when progress doesn't happen as quickly as we'd like. But quiet growth encourages us to be patient with ourselves, to recognize that growth is a process, not a destination. It reminds us that setbacks are a natural part of the journey and that every step forward, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction. Letting go of who you were is one of the most challenging, yet most necessary steps in personal transformation. It requires courage, deep, raw courage, because it involves releasing not just the comfortable parts of your past, but also the identity you've spent years building. Who we have been, the roles we've played, the beliefs we've held these things shape how we view ourselves and how others see us. To let go of these aspects of ourselves can feel like stepping into an unknown abyss, leaving behind the safety of familiarity for the uncertainty of something new. Yet it is in this act of letting go that true growth begins. The person you once were served a purpose, even if that purpose was merely survival. Every version of you has contributed something to your journey, even in moments of hardship or struggle. Maybe there were times when you had to put on a brave face, take on a role you didn't truly desire, or adopt beliefs that no longer serve you just to get through. There may have been times when you defined yourself by what was expected of you, or when you played small to avoid standing out, or to keep things simple. But holding on to those past versions of yourself can become a weight, preventing you from moving forward, from becoming the person you are meant to be. What makes letting go so difficult is that we often feel a sense of loyalty to the identity we've crafted. The habits, patterns, and ways of thinking that once protected us or helped us navigate certain phases of life become ingrained. Even when those behaviors no longer serve us, they provide a sense of safety, a sense of knowing who we are in the context of our past experiences. It takes immense courage to acknowledge that the time has come to release those parts of ourselves, to recognize that in order to grow, we must shed the layers that have kept us bound to who we used to be. Letting go also requires us to confront the fear of the unknown. Who will we become once we release the old stories we've told ourselves? What will life look like when we no longer cling to the familiar but outdated version of ourselves? These questions can be daunting because they force us to step into a space where there are no guarantees, no clear answers. We must be willing to embrace uncertainty, to trust that by letting go, we are making room for something greater to emerge, even if we can't yet see what that is. This process of letting go is not about rejecting or denying our past. It's about honoring who we were while also recognizing that we are not confined by that version of ourselves. We are constantly evolving, and holding on too tightly to a past identity can stifle that evolution. The person you were 5 years ago or even 5 months ago may no longer reflect who you are becoming. And that's okay. Growth requires us to be adaptable, to release the need to fit into old molds, and to embrace the idea that who we are is not fixed, it is fluid, ever-changing, and always expanding. Part of the courage to let go also involves facing the emotional attachments we have to our former selves. We may have invested so much time and energy into becoming a certain type of person that it feels almost like a betrayal to move on. There may be grief involved, a sense of loss for the person we once were. But this is a necessary part of the process. In every transformation, there is an element of loss of the old self, loss of the familiar ways of being. But within that loss is the potential for something new, something deeper, more aligned with who we truly are. Another layer of complexity in letting go is the external pressure to stay the same. People around us, friends, family, colleagues, may have come to know us as a particular type of person. They may have expectations about how we should behave, what we should believe, or how we should navigate our lives. Letting go of who you were sometimes means disappointing others, shaking up the dynamics that have existed for years. This can feel incredibly uncomfortable, but it's important to remember that your growth is not dependent on others' approval. The courage to let go often means standing firm in your decision to evolve, even when those around you resist or struggle to understand the changes you're making. Letting go of who you were also requires a certain level of self-compassion. This is not a process that happens overnight, nor is it linear. There will be moments when you slip back into old patterns, when the familiar pulls you back, because it feels safer than stepping into the unknown. It's important to be gentle with yourself during these times, to recognize that growth is a journey, not a destination. There will be setbacks, but each time you choose to release a piece of your old self, you are creating space for something new to grow. At the heart of this transformation is the recognition that who you were was never meant to define who you will become. Our identities are not static, and clinging to old versions of ourselves only limits our potential. The courage to let go allows us to step into a new version of ourselves, one that is more aligned with our values, our desires, and our purpose. It is a process of becoming, of allowing ourselves to evolve without the constraints of who we once were. Letting go of who you were also invites you to reimagine what is possible. When you release the old narratives, you free yourself from the limitations that those narratives imposed. You begin to see new possibilities, new paths forward that were once obscured by the weight of your past identity. You start to understand that your potential is not confined by your past experiences, but is instead shaped by your willingness to grow beyond them. This act of letting go is not just a one-time decision, it is an ongoing practice. Every day, we are presented with opportunities to release something that no longer serves us, whether it's a belief, a habit, or an old way of thinking. Each time we choose to let go, we move closer to becoming the person we are meant to be. It is a continual process of shedding old layers, of embracing the unknown, and of trusting that the journey of transformation is leading us towards something greater. In the journey of transformation, disappearing from the noise of external validation and old identities is essential for true growth. By embracing vulnerability, disconnecting to reconnect, cultivating quiet growth, and finding the courage to let go of who we once were, we create space for our most authentic selves to emerge. This process is not immediate or easy, but it is profound. Through the silence, we build resilience, inner strength, and the clarity to pursue a more aligned, purposeful life. Transformation happens when we step away from the past and trust the process of becoming something greater,